The K-9 was told to attack, but when it got closer, something incredible happened. Rain hammered Millbrook like a drum roll from hell, turning its narrow streets into rivers of mud and shadow. The convenience store's alarm shrieked through the night, a jagged wail that yanked Officer Tom Bennett from his cruiser's warmth. "Max, let's move!" he barked, his voice cutting through the downpour. Beside him, Max, a sleek German shepherd with eyes like polished obsidian, sprang into action, his paws pounding the pavement as they plunged into the maze of alleys behind the store. Lightning split the sky, illuminating a figure sprinting ahead. The suspect, a wiry kid in a soaked hoodie, darting between dumpsters and chain-link fences. Bennett's breath fogged in the cold, his flashlight beam dancing over wet brick as Max surged forward, a black and tan blur honed by years of training. They'd run this drill 100 times. Store break-ins, bar fights, car chases, and Max never faltered. Decorated twice by the precinct, he was Bennett's right hand, a K-9 with instincts sharper than any blade. The alley narrowed, a dead end looming, and the kid stumbled, cornered against a graffiti-smeared wall. "Hands up!" Bennett shouted, his Glock steady, rain streaking his face. The suspect turned, palms raised, his young face pale and streaked with fear under the hood. "I didn't do it," he yelled, voice cracking. Bennett stepped closer, Max at his heel, ready to lunge. "Max, forward!" The command was crisp, routine, except Max didn't move. The shepherd froze, ears twitching, then, impossibly, his tail wagged. A low whimper escaped his throat as the kid stared, wide-eyed, and whispered a single word. "Apollo?" Bennett's world tilted. That wasn't Max's call sign. Max didn't whimper. He didn't wag at suspects. Yet here he was, this rock of a dog, trembling like a puppy, his gaze locked on the kid like he'd seen a ghost. "What the hell did you say?" Bennett snapped, lowering his gun a fraction, rain dripping from his cap. The kid, Marcus Rivera, he'd later learn, stammered, "Apollo, my dog. It's him, isn't it?" Before Bennett could process it, headlights sliced through the alley. Backup screeched in, tires splashing, led by Officer Rick Stone, a hulking man with a limp and a temper, his badge tarnished by years of cutting corners. "Cuff him!" Stone growled, shoving past Bennett to yank Marcus's arms behind his back. "Caught red-handed," Marcus thrashed, pleading. "I was helping a guy. Homeless. Hurt. Not robbing anything." Stone ignored him, snapping the cuffs tight. Then came the voice, shrill, unsteady, cutting through the rain. "Let him go!" Mrs. Clara Thompson, an elderly widow in a drenched coat, hobbled from the store's back door, her cane tapping furiously. "He didn't steal a damn thing. That boy was carrying soup cans for old Joe." Bennett turned, but Stone waved her off. "Go home, Clara. You're confused." Max whimpered again, louder, pressing against Bennett's leg, his eyes never leaving Marcus. The kid knelt as Stone dragged him up, whispering, "Apollo, it's me!" And Max lunged, not to attack, but to nuzzle, his nose brushing Marcus's cuffed hands. Bennett grabbed Max's collar, pulling him back, heart pounding. "Stand down, Max!" But the dog resisted, a soft whine echoing in the storm. Stone shoved Marcus toward the cruiser, sneering. "Your mutt's losing it, Bennett. Get him checked." The team piled in, lights flashing, leaving Bennett and Max in the alley's gloom. Clara limped closer, her gray eyes sharp despite her age. "That boy's no thief," she insisted. "And your dog knows it. Something's wrong here, Tom." Bennett stared at Max, rain pooling around them. The shepherd sat, head cocked toward the departing cruiser, his body taut with something Bennett couldn't name. Recognition, longing. 5 years on the force, Max had been his shadow, found as a stray, trained to perfection, never a crack in his armor. Until now. "Apollo," he muttered, testing the word. Max's ears flicked, his whine rising. The precinct loomed ahead as they trudged back, a squat brick building slick with rain. Inside, Marcus sat in holding, his hoodie dripping, his story spilling out. A puppy stolen from his yard 5 years ago, a black and tan bundle he'd named Apollo. "He's got a scar, left flank, from a fence," Marcus said, voice breaking. Bennett glanced at Max, sprawled by the cell door, eyes fixed on the kid. He'd seen that scar, faint, jagged, a detail he'd never questioned. Clara lingered, handing Bennett a soggy Polaroid. "Look at this tomorrow, Tom," she said. "Something's rotten." He tucked it away, unease coiling in his gut. At his desk, he pulled Max's file, thin, typed pages from the day he'd been rescued. Dates smudged, origins vague, signed by Rick Stone. Max paced, restless, ignoring Bennett's calls, his nose pressed to the cell bars. The rain didn't stop, drumming the roof as Bennett sat, Max at his feet, Marcus's whisper replaying in his head. Apollo. A name from a past he didn't know, one Max seemed to remember. Something was off. Stone's rush, the missing security tape he'd requested, Clara's certainty. Bennett's trust in his partner, his dog, his precinct trembled. In Millbrook's shadows, a truth was clawing free, and it started with a chase that wasn't what it seemed. The rain hadn't let up by morning, a gray curtain smothering Millbrook as Tom Bennett slumped at his precinct desk, Max sprawled at his feet. The German shepherd's restless pacing had stopped, but his eyes stayed fixed on the holding cell where Marcus Rivera sat, head in his hands, the damp hoodie still clinging to his frame. Last night's chase replayed in Bennett's mind. The alley, Marcus's surrender, that whispered Apollo, shaking Max like a thunderclap. It didn't make sense. Max was his partner, a stray turned K9 star, not some kid's lost pet. Yet the dog's whimpers, his refusal to leave Marcus's side, gnawed at Bennett like a splinter under skin. He rubbed his eyes, the Polaroid from Mrs. Clara Thompson crinkling in his pocket. He pulled it out, water stains blurring the edges but not the image. A younger Marcus, maybe 15, kneeling beside a black and tan puppy with a jagged scar on its left flank. The dog's ears perked, its tongue lolling. Happy, alive. Bennett glanced at Max, sprawled but alert, and lifted the shepherd's fur. There it was, the same scar, faint but unmistakable, a relic of offense Marcus had described. His stomach twisted. Coincidence didn't stretch this far. The precinct buzzed with its usual grind, phones ringing, officers shuffling reports, but a hush hung over Bennett's corner. He flipped open Max's file again, the sparse pages mocking him. Found stray, Millbrook outskirts, June 2020, it read, followed by training logs and a signature, Rick Stone. The dates were off, smudged, retyped, a sloppy cover-up. Stone had logged Max's intake, pushed him through K9 certification fast, too fast. Bennett's fingers tightened on the paper. Something stank, and it wasn't just the wet dog smell filling the room. Marcus stirred, his voice hoarse through the bars. "He was mine, officer. Apollo. My dad got him for me after Mom died. Some mutt's pup, but he was everything. Slept in my bed, followed me everywhere." He swallowed, eyes red. 5 years back, I came home from school, and he was gone. Yard gate busted, no note, nothing. Cops said strays get snatched, but I knew someone took him. He nodded at Max. "That's him. I'd know him anywhere." Max whined, pressing his nose to the bars, tail thumping softly. Bennett crouched beside him, hand on his collar. "Max, sit." The dog obeyed, but his gaze didn't waver from Marcus. "Apollo," Bennett tested, low and firm. Max's head snapped up, ears pricking, a sharp bark echoing. The room stilled. 2 officers at the coffee machine froze, staring. Bennett's pulse quickened. "He answers to it," he muttered, more to himself than Marcus. The security footage should have cleared this up. Store cameras catching the break-in, proving Marcus guilty or not. But when Bennett checked the system, the file was gone. "Technical glitch," the desk sergeant shrugged, barely looking up. "Happens." "Bullshit." Bennett stormed to evidence lockup, demanding the backup drive. "Not logged yet," came the reply, a dodge too convenient. Max trailed him, restless, his claws clicking on tile like a metronome to Bennett's rising anger. Clara Thompson shuffled in at noon, her cane tapping a determined beat, a plastic sleeve of photos in hand. "Told you it's rotten, Tom," she said, sliding the stack across his desk. "Look at these. 5 years ago, night Apollo went missing." The images were grainy, snapped from her porch. Rick Stone's cruiser parked near Marcus's rundown house, Stone himself loading a dog carrier into the trunk. His limp was clear, the same hitch Bennett saw daily. "He was there," Clara said, voice trembling with age and fury. "I didn't connect it till now." Bennett's jaw clenched. Stone, his mentor, the hard ass who taught him the ropes, tied to this? He'd always been rough, a limping ex-patrolman bitter after a knee injury sidelined him, but this was a leap. "Why'd he take a kid's dog?" Bennett asked, flipping through the shots. Clara's eyes narrowed. "Money, power. Why else? He's been shady since his patrol days." Back at his desk, Bennett tested Marcus's story. "Call him," he said, nodding at Max. Marcus leaned to the bars, voice soft. "Apollo, come." Max bolted upright, trotting to the cell, pawing the metal. "Down," Marcus said. Max dropped flat, tail wagging. Bennett tried it. "Max, down." The dog hesitated, then complied, but slower, less eager. "Son of a bitch," Bennett breathed. This wasn't training, this was memory. Stone barged in an hour later, his bulk filling the doorway, raincoat dripping. "What's this I hear about you soft on the kid?" he growled, glaring at Marcus. "He's a thief. Caught him myself." Max bristled, a low growl rumbling as Stone stepped closer. "Control your damn dog, Bennett," Stone snapped. But Max didn't back off, planting himself between Stone and the cell. "He's not my dog right now," Bennett said, standing, his voice ice. "He's his." He jerked a thumb at Marcus. Stone's face darkened, a vein pulsing in his neck. "You're losing it, Tom. That mutt's a tool, not a reunion story." He turned to leave, but Bennett called after him. "Where's the footage, Rick? And why is your name all over Max's file?" Stone paused, then stalked out without a word, his limp more pronounced in the silence. Bennett sat hard, Max nudging his hand. The pieces didn't fit clean yet, but they were falling. Stone's presence at Marcus's house, the missing tape, Max's reaction. Clara's photos burned in his pocket, a lead he couldn't ignore. "We're not done, boy," he said to Max, scratching his ears. The dog's eyes, Apollo's eyes, met his, steady and sure. Whatever Stone was hiding, Bennett would dig it out, even if it meant tearing down the man he'd once trusted. Tom Bennett's office felt smaller as dusk crept over Millbrook, the rain a relentless tattoo against the precinct windows. Max lay by the door, his ears twitching at every footstep, his body angled toward Marcus Rivera's cell down the hall. The kid's story, Apollo stolen, Max reborn, had rooted deep in Bennett's gut, and Clara Thompson's photos fanned the flames. Rick Stone's cruiser, that dog carrier, the limp tying him to a night 5 years gone. It wasn't coincidence anymore. It was a trail, and Bennett was on it. He hit the convenience store at dawn, badgering the owner for backup footage. "Main drive's with you guys," the man grumbled, but dug out a USB from a cluttered drawer. "Old system. Sometimes it catches stuff." Bennett plugged it into his laptop back at the precinct. Max sprawled beside him. The grainy video rolled. No break-in, just Marcus hauling cans to a slumped figure. Old Joe, the homeless vet Clara swore by. Then, minutes before the alarm, Stone appeared, limping into frame, gloved hands fiddling with the lock, planting a crowbar by the door. Tampering, clear as day. The alarm wasn't a response, it was a setup. Bennett's blood ran hot. Stone framing Marcus wasn't just dirty, it was personal. He dug into Max's file again, cross-checking dates with precinct logs. Stone's signature littered every page, but the intake form was a lie. June 2020, a stray found days after Clara's photos placed him at Marcus's house. No vet check, no shelter record, just Stone's word. Bennett slammed the file shut, Max's head snapping up at the sound. The pattern clicked. Stone, sidelined by injury, bitter and broke, turning to profit. A memory surfaced. Stone bragging years back about side gigs, deals with a security firm upstate. "Dogs fetch good money if they're trained right," he'd said, smirking over beers. Bennett hadn't cared then. Cops talked big. Now it screamed truth. Stone hadn't just taken Apollo, he'd stolen him, molded him into Max, a K9 cash cow. But why keep him? Why not sell? Stone stormed in at noon, his raincoat slapping wet against his legs, face red with rage. "You're stirring shit, Tom," he bellowed, slamming a fist on the desk. Max growled, rising, but Bennett waved him down. "Evidence says you're the one stinking, Rick," he shot back, tossing Clara's photos across the table. "You, Marcus's place, night his dog vanished. Explain that." Stone's eyes flicked to the images, his limp shifting as he leaned closer. "Old lady's senile. That's not me." But his voice tightened, a crack in the armor. Bennett slid the USB forward. "Store footage. Marcus helping. You framing. Your prints'll be on that crowbar. And Max? He knows Marcus, not you." "Watch," he nodded to the cell. "Marcus, call him." From down the hall, Marcus's voice rang out, soft but firm. "Apollo here." Max bolted, claws skittering, barking joyfully as he reached the bars. Stone's hand twitched toward his holster, but Bennett stepped in front. "He's not your dog, Rick. Never was." Stone lunged, grabbing Bennett's collar. "You're ruining me over a damn mutt?" he roared. Max snarled, teeth flashing, and Stone stumbled back, cursing. "That dog was trouble, wouldn't obey, wouldn't sell. I had to fix him." The words slipped, a confession spilling in the heat. Bennett shoved him off, voice cold. "Fix him how? By stealing him? Training him for your scam?" The captain burst in, alerted by the shouts. Captain Hayes, a wiry man with zero patience for drama. "What the hell's this?" he barked. Bennett laid it out. Photos, footage, Max's loyalty shift. Stone sputtered, but Hayes cut him off. "Locker room now, Stone. You're off duty till I see every shred." Bennett trailed Max to holding, the dog planting himself by Marcus's cell, growling when Stone's shadow passed. "He trusts you," Bennett said, meeting Marcus's eyes. "Always did." Marcus nodded, tears streaking. "He's Apollo. I'd know him blind." That night, Bennett sat with the USB, replaying Stone's frame job. The why burned, profit, sure, but keeping Apollo meant more. Control, pride, a broken man clutching a broken scheme. Max, Apollo, curled beside him, a silent vow to see this through. Stone's walls were cracking, and Bennett would smash them wide open. The precinct simmered with tension as dawn broke over Millbrook, the rain finally easing into a drizzle that tapped the windows like a fading heartbeat. Tom Bennett stood outside Captain Hayes' office. Apollo, sitting rigid at his side, his ears pricked toward the muffled shouts within. Rick Stone's voice boomed through the door, ragged with defiance, but Hayes' sharp retorts cut deeper. Bennett clutched the USB of store footage in one hand, Clara Thompson's photos in the other, evidence that had turned suspicion into a noose. Marcus Rivera waited in holding, his fate hinging on what unraveled now. Hayes emerged, his face carved with exhaustion, Stone trailing behind, cuffed and scowling. "He's suspended," Hayes said, voice clipped. "Spilled enough to bury himself, but I need more. Hard proof tying him to the dog." He glanced at Apollo, who growled low as Stone passed. "Get it, Bennett. Today." Stone's eyes met Bennett's, venom flashing. "You're a fool, Tom," he hissed, his limp dragging as deputies hauled him to a chair. "That mutt's nothing. Worthless without me." Apollo's hackles rose, but Bennett held his collar. "Keep talking, Rick. You're digging your own grave." The key was Stone's past. His side gigs Bennett had brushed off years ago. He hit the precinct records, pulling Stone's old patrol logs. Gaps glared. Nights unaccounted for, vague entries about animal control calls. Then a lead, a storage unit lease filed under Stone's name, renewed yearly since 2020, the year Apollo vanished. Bennett grabbed his keys, Apollo leaping into the cruiser beside him. "Let's see what you hid, boy," he muttered, the dog's tail thumping once. The unit sat on Millbrook's edge, a rusted box in a row of forgotten lockers, rain pooling around its base. Bennett pried the lock with bolt cutters, Apollo pacing as the door screeched open. Inside, dust coated a hoard of secrets, crates of dog collars, training gear, files stamped with the security firm's logo, Apex Protection. One box held a jackpot, a faded blue collar, Apollo stitched in frayed thread, Marcus's address scrawled on the tag. Bennett's breath caught, proof Stone hadn't just taken the dog. He'd kept a trophy. Back at the precinct, Hayes spread the haul across his desk. Collars, invoices, a ledger listing Apex payouts. He was selling strays, Hayes said, flipping pages. Train them, flip them for thousands. Apollo's in here. Non-compliant, retained. Bennett handed over the collar. Retained because he fought back, he said. Marcus's dog wouldn't bend. Stone cracked when Hayes shoved the collar in his face. Slumped in interrogation, deputies flanking him, he snarled. Fine, I took the damn pup. Apex wanted fighters. Paid big for K9 grade dogs. That one, he jabbed a finger at Apollo, who bared teeth from Bennett's side. He wouldn't heal. Bit a trainer. Cost me a deal. So I kept him, made him max. My own little victory. Why frame Marcus? Bennett pressed, voice steel. Stone's lip curled. Kids saw me that night. Yelled Apollo as I drove off. When I heard he tripped the store alarm, I figured I'd shut him up for good. Planted the break-in, ditched the tape. He laughed bitter. Should have sold the bastard when I had the chance. Hayes slammed the table. You're done, Stone. Corruption, theft, evidence tampering, decades worth. He nodded to Bennett. Uncuff the kid. This ends now. Marcus stumbled from holding, knees buckling as Apollo raced to him, barking joyfully, paws scrabbling at his legs. Apollo! Marcus choked, dropping to hug the dog, tears mixing with rain still clinging to his face. Apollo licked his cheeks, tail a blur, 5 years of separation erased in a heartbeat. Bennett watched, throat tight, the collar in his hand a bridge between then and now. Stone's confession rippled fast. Apex's owners lawyered up, but the ledger tied them to dozens of missing pets. Millbrook's strays turned into profit. Hayes suspended Stone pending trial, his badge stripped, his limp a mocking echo as he was led away. Bennett stood by Apollo, the dog's head pressed to Marcus's knee. He's yours, he told Marcus, voice rough. Always was. Marcus shook his head, eyes on Apollo. He's yours too, man. He trusts you. Saved me because of you. Bennett crouched, scratching Apollo's ears, the shepherd's gaze shifting between them. Guess we share him, he said, a faint smile breaking through. The precinct buzzed with the fallout, deputies whispering, Hayes barking orders to clean house. Bennett sat with Apollo that night, the collar on his desk, a silent vow to the dog he'd called Max. Stone's empire of deceit was crumbling, but the cost lingered. Years stolen from Marcus, trust shattered in the force. Apollo nudged his hand, steady as ever, and Bennett knew they'd finish this together. Millbrook woke to a fragile calm, the rain gone, leaving puddles that mirrored a sky bruised with dawn. Tom Bennett leaned against his cruiser outside Marcus Rivera's house, a sagging duplex on the town's frayed edge, watching Apollo bound through the overgrown yard. Marcus tossed a frayed tennis ball, laughing as the German shepherd leaped, his scar glinting in the light. 5 years apart, and they moved like no time had passed. A bond Stone's betrayal couldn't break. Bennett's chest ached, pride and loss tangling as he adjusted to a partner split between worlds. Apollo's dual life took shape fast. Days he rode with Bennett, patrolling Millbrook streets, his K9 vest snug, his focus razor sharp. Nights and weekends he sprawled on Marcus's porch, guarding the family. Marcus his dad, a sister who'd squealed when Apollo nosed her hand. He's home, Marcus told Bennett one evening, the dog chewing a bone at his feet. But he's still yours out there. Bennett nodded, clapping Marcus's shoulder. He's got 2 packs now, loyal to a fault. The precinct didn't escape the storm. Stone's trial loomed, his confession and the storage hall pinning him with theft, fraud, and a dozen corruption counts. 20 years minimum, lawyers said. Apex folded under scrutiny, its execs indicted. Millbrook's missing dogs, a headline that stung. Captain Hayes overhauled the force. New audits, body cams, a zero-tolerance line. No more Stones, he growled at roll call, eyes on Bennett. You set the bar now. Clara Thompson got her due. Her photos, her stubborn memory, broke the case wide. Hayes offered her a civilian liaison gig, a desk to keep the precinct honest. Never thought I'd wear a badge, she chuckled, pinning a nameplate to her coat, cane prop nearby. Bennett saluted her with a coffee mug. You earned it, Clara. Saw what we missed. Marcus rebuilt, too. With Apollo back, he took a job at the store he'd been framed at, stacking shelves, saving for trade school. Gonna fix cars, he told Bennett, grease on his hands. Apollo sprawled nearby. He kept me going. Gotta make him proud. Bennett saw the kid's spine straighten, a shadow lifting, with every day the dog stayed close. Apollo's story spread. Local news ran it. K9's memory cracks corruption ring. Papers piling up on Bennett's desk. Offers rolled in. Trainers wanting Apollo for demos. Vets studying loyalty bonds. But Bennett waved them off. He's earned his peace, he said, watching Apollo chase Marcus's ball. The shepherd's dual role became Millbrook's quiet legend. Cop by day, family by dusk, a bridge between duty and love. Bennett changed too. Nights alone in his apartment, once filled with Max's snores, felt hollow, until Marcus invited him over, Apollo dragging him in by the sleeve. They'd sit, splitting beers, the dog sprawled between, a silent pact forged in rain and truth. You gave him back to me, Marcus said once, voice thick. Never thought I'd see him again. Bennett shrugged, petting Apollo's head. He never forgot you. That's what got us here. A year later, Bennett stood at the precinct lot, Apollo's old collar, the one from Stone's stash, hanging from his rearview mirror. The force was cleaner, tighter, Hayes's reforms rooting out rot. Clara manned her post, Marcus fixed engines, and Apollo split his days, a black and tan thread tying Millbrook's scars to its strength. Stone rotted in a cell upstate, his empire dust, his name a curse, deputies spat. One crisp fall evening, Bennett drove to the alley where it started. The chase, the whisper, the crack in his world. Apollo sat shotgun, ears up, the old tennis ball between his paws. You knew, didn't you? Bennett said, scratching the dog's neck. All along. Apollo barked, sharp and clear, then nosed the window open, wind ruffling his fur. Millbrook wasn't perfect. Potholes still scarred its roads, shadows lingered in its corners, but it stood taller. From a rainy night to a stunning reunion, Apollo proved loyalty could outlast betrayal, memory could topple lies. Bennett started the engine, Apollo's tail thumping, and pulled away. The town gleamed ahead, forged anew by a dog's heart and a cop's resolve. Proof that truth, like love, could claw through the darkest storm.